earlier this month and giving one in Watertown next month, so just
Right.
always talking about climate.
Yeah, and it makes a big difference, and that movement has literally engaged millions of people around the world, not just here in the U.S., but other countries as well, and that's what we need to do to make sure we see, changes occurring. That's why some 37 states in the U.S. today have some form of climate policy that they've adopted. Not as aggressively as Massachusetts has, certainly not as aggressive as California has, but without the citizen leadership demanding of their legislators these types of changes, we wouldn't have seen, half of that take place, and that came about because of citizen engagement. So we need to do more of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Keith, I just wanted to add, in addition to your partnership with people like Senator Pacheco with the Al Gore Climate Reality Project, just in Littleton, and just an example to me of how really we need to step up as a state is on the public transportation front. For those of you that take the Fitchburg commuter line into Cambridge or Boston, the thing that we found is it's such a success that more people want to park at the stations, and yet we're not creating enough parking spots to allow for more people to take the train. And obviously, the more cars we can get off of the road, off of Route 2, onto train stations, the more we're going to reduce our carbon emissions. So Keith and I have partnered to get funding to add more parking spots at Littleton, and just recently got an announcement from the MBTA to provide an additional $1.5 million grant to hopefully build about another 100 parking spots at the Littleton train station. So thank you for your work on Keith. Okay, the next person we have is Dave Weber from Stowe. Okay. Graham Taylor from Sudbury. Okay. Margaret and Fred Rose.
No, thank you.
Okay. A lot of listeners here tonight. That's okay.
Supporters.
And supporters. Absolutely. Susan Berry.
I'm good.
Michael from Acton. First letter, first name M, first letter of last name P. Okay. Michael Dalma from Wayland. Mike, okay. Apologize if I.
Not a problem, gentlemen, and it's good. Thanks so much. You guys are doing an amazing job, and I'm coming first and foremost to thank you. It's great to have leaders here in Massachusetts. It's great to be here. I grew up in Sudbury, just down the road, and I live in Wayland now. I have a lot of friends living in Sudbury still. So, the one or two things I want to just ask about and make sure that they're just part of the conversation. The first is, I know in Chicago they've done a nice job with rooftop gardens, and I didn't know if that's something that we look at in Massachusetts. A good source of oxygenation. So that was just one thing. The second is, it was a few years ago when the big earthquake hit in Haiti. So I went down there, do a little bit of work like so many people probably in this room, and one of the things that shocked me was realizing the difference between Haiti and the Dominican Republic, sharing an island, and the devastating effects of on the one part versus the other, and how much of that was connected to the deforestation. That with the lack of trees, the inability to stop flooding, and so I realized there are so many of these interconnected variables, but one of the key pieces is the deforestation. So to suddenly make myself really unpopular, I just want to share a couple of statistics. So one thing that's interesting is that about 20% or more of greenhouse gases, according to a variety of sources from Scientific American to the United Nations, are actually caused by animal agriculture and just by eating meat. So I was thinking we might want to talk about a different kind of stakeholder, if you will. Thank you. It's my mom in the audience. No, not trying to push the topic, but just something, it's a part of the public awareness, is understanding, for example, that someone that goes from being a meat eater to being vegan actually saves not 10, 20, 50, 100, or 1,000 gallons of water a year, 220,000 gallons of water per person for that. It's a lot of water. There's a percentage of deforestation in the Amazon, which of course is important for our production of oxygen and absorbing greenhouse gases. That's related to cattle grazing and cattle farming. It's not 5%, 10%, 20%. It's 80%. So it's just part of the public dialogue. It's not a thing that needs to be legislated or tell people what they need to do. It's a personal choice, like so many things in America. But knowledge is part of making that good decision. So I wanted to make sure that was at least brought up tonight. The last thing is just a reinforcement of some of the people that are encouraging you guys to be these amazing cheerleaders. I think one of the problems is the lack of information. It's not that the information isn't there, it's that it's drowned out. And there's so much garbage out there that's absorbing our attention. I go to the gas station and they've got like gas station TV. I'm like, oh, I should subscribe to that. But there's so much just junk in our face. So that's fine. But could we find ways through the legislature to get public service announcements and other use various media to get the word out there about things we can do? And I know it's out there a little bit, public service announcements, but not the level we need to create that sense of urgency that I think the people in the room here tonight feel. So that's my comment. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael. Next is John Reardon. John still
I
here?
think John left. Yeah, I believe.
Okay, Beverly O'Connor. Terry Snyder.
I'm fine.
Okay. Jean Krieger.
I pass, thanks.
Okay. Rosemary DeBurr. Sudbury. Marge Longwear. Sudbury.
I'll pass.
Okay. Bruce Langmeyer. Okay.
While Bruce is coming up, let me just say about getting through the media
Yeah.
onslaught that's out there. I was chairing the environmental committee back when this committee was established. The reason why we established the Global Warming and Climate Change Committee was because in the environmental committee, we had so many things coming at us. And to talk specifically about climate change only was impossible. We just didn't get the attention. So that's why we created the separate committee. So when we go around the state now, and we're talking about this, hopefully the next day in the press, locally, they'll be talking about, climate change and these issues. But you're right, there's so much more we need to be doing. Thank you so much.
I want to thank you, Bruce Langer from Sudbury, also a member of this church, and an activist for several decades. People should know that we can't put windmills anywhere. The average wind needs to be around 13 miles per hour. Therefore, most of the state is not a candidate for windmills, but the offshore wind sure is and needs to be pushed for that reason. I'd like to take the New England states to work together like they did in the RGGI before and work as a block of states and thus have more impact getting things done. I also would like to extend some of the programs like Mass Save because a lot has been done under that and a lot more publicity needs to be made to the public so they realize what they can do. I talked to many people and totally ignorant about programs like this. We need more publicity. And furthermore, I would like to take the dates that we've given as deadlines. I think they're far too long and we don't have time to wait. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce.
Bruce, just so you'll be aware, The Council of State Governments, which is an organization that deals with both legislature, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. It's the only organization that's out there like that. We have a Energy and Environmental Committee, and it's for the Eastern Regional Conference, so it's all of the states from New York, Pennsylvania, the rest of the Northeast, and believe it or not, including Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. I don't know how that happened, but in the wintertime, it's not a bad place for a meeting. But we are actually working together, all of those states, the legislature, to try to come up with some common consensus around issues that we can work together on. So that is going on. As a matter of fact, this week at the State House, we're having a forum on wind, the wind industry, the offshore wind industry, along with the University of Massachusetts, Boston, the former DEP commissioner is leading the effort as the dean there, and they're going to be having a briefing at the State House to educate legislators and senators. They already did one for the House, now we're doing one for the Senate, so that not only Senator Eldridge and I, but all of our colleagues that may not have had the opportunity to see the importance, as you said, of offshore wind. There's 742,000 acres of ocean that has been set aside for this purpose by the federal government, and a good portion of that has been leased out, and so it's a matter of getting those purchase agreements established. But there's enough wind out there to be doing far more than what we did in the energy diversity bill.
Especially with storage.
Absolutely, because that could make, that will really go back on those dates that you're talking about, 2050. We can really make a huge difference if we go forward dramatically with these types of investments. Thank you.
Great, next person is Sandra Petrovis, Framingham?
Trocus,
I'm sorry. I
no
said
worries. I can pass.
that. Okay, thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Tracy Bond, Sudbury? Tracy, Sudbury. Sandra Lasky, Sudbury. Peg Espinola, Sudbury. Peg, you want to speak?
Just a couple of questions.
Sure.
A question. Well, again, I want to join everyone else in thanking you guys for what you've done and are doing. It's fantastic. I wondered what is the impact of the current change in the federal administration on our plans, and also pushback from the fossil fuel industry. How does that impact your work, and is there anything we can do to mitigate those effects?
Well, thank you very much. It's obviously having a significant impact. Just attitudinally, it makes a big difference with a lot of the players across the U.S. and our allies, in the world. When I heard mostly from leaders in Portugal, in Ireland, people I talked to in Denmark and Sweden, in Austria, their number one issue was, what about the Paris Agreement? Are you staying in the Paris Agreement? Will he stay in the Paris Agreement? Over and over and over and over again. And so that decision has not been finalized, I understand, but it is important to make sure. I know our delegation is 100% in favor of staying in the agreement. The good news is the markets have shifted significantly. That when we look at the markets around renewable energy technology, new technology, storage, etc., a lot of the investment dollars have decided to go in a different direction. One of the major bidders that will bid, I'm sure, on the offshore wind is a company named Dong Energy. Well, Dong Energy stands for Danish Oil and Natural Gas. They were a Danish oil and natural gas company. They decided, from the perspective of national security, getting off the spigot that came from Russia, and wanting to make sure they could chart a new course for themselves. So a lot of these countries, that was their impetus to actually move forward, even, you know, in addition to obviously the climate change issue. But they're an example of a company that was an oil and natural gas company that is now primarily a renewable energy company. And they're leading in the offshore wind industry, along with 2 or 3 other major companies that are out there doing that. So yes, it is having an impact, but I think the market has already shifted enough where there is wind to our back, so to speak. And so that's good news. At the local level and at the state level, what I've been trying to say to my colleagues, not only locally but in other states, is this is an opportunity for the states to lead. We need to lead. And by the way, when Barack Obama was president, the whole 8 years he was there, even though we had Gina McCarthy in there, and we had the Secretary of Energy from Massachusetts, and we had a whole range of other people that were cutting-edge leaders, the Congress still would not adopt comprehensive legislation that they wanted to see get done, right? So a lot of the repeals that need to take place, say with the Clean Power Plan at the national level, the executive orders are done, but those executive orders by themselves will not change very quickly policy. So we have a few years yet before we start to see major changes that will impact. The big problem is in the budgets. What will the federal budgets look like going forward, and how will they impact state budgets? So that is something we're paying attention to. I think, did you go to DC?
Yes.
Senator Eldridge actually went on a mission to DC to try to figure out what's happening in the new administration. I can tell you I've been there a few times, and right now a lot of people are not sure, where their offices are. So, and so we've got to worry a little bit more once they know where they are. But right now, the substantive level of dealing with regulatory policy and so on and so forth, I think we're okay for the next couple of years. But that means we really got to move forward at the state level. It would be so much easier if we could, as a national power, just move forward as some of the other, as Germany had, for example. Germany was totally a different situation just 10 years ago. And you look at, Germany today, I mean, they're way out ahead on these issues. Denmark, Sweden, I mean, a whole range of other countries. They can do it, so can't we. And actually, we can do it a lot more quickly once we decide to do it. And that's the problem. It's getting the consensus in the country, and in particular nationally, to get it done. But when you look at where people live in the U.S., the blue borders, you look at Massachusetts, the Northeast, you look at California, Oregon, Washington State, and a lot of the big population states where there's a lot of energy use. A lot of the smart cities in America are doing the right thing. A lot of the mayors are leading around the country. So, because I see so much about what's happening, I think we can do a lot more, but I don't disagree with you. We've got to watch it, and people are crying out for us not to back away from the commitment. They're asking us to lead. And I can tell you, as the chair of the committee and President Pro Tempore of the Senate, I know that our Senate President is totally committed, 100% committed to this clean energy, fossil fuel reduction, for the future. And I know that leaders like Senator Eldridge, we're very lucky in Massachusetts in terms of the Senate side in particular, and meeting your representative tonight, and those of you that have other representatives that represent you. I would ask you, please, after tonight, pick up the phone tomorrow and call them. And tell them you were here, and what you heard, and what you want them to do. Because it will make a difference.
How threatened are the federal tax credits on electric cars? How likely is tax policy change that you're assuming?
It's uncertain if I could add, but I will say there's a fair amount of support for those tax credits in red states, so, you know, it could be a bipartisan commitment in Congress to oppose any effort to repeal the law, so. I do want to have time for everyone to testify, so. Michael Bate? Michael, did you want to testify? Is he still here? Okay. Tina Woolston? Maynard? Tina is here. Patricia Burke from Norfolk. Good evening.
I'm not in the district anymore.
Thanks for coming back.
Thank you so much, yes. So I'm asking for expedited passage of Representative Kulik's bill, which is H3400, and it guarantees that groups of ratepayers can intervene at the Department of Public Utilities, whether it's wind, gas pipelines, whatever. In the 1990s, due to the oil embargo, we started making these energy-efficient devices that overloaded the grid. They caused the neutrals to overheat, the motors and transformers to burn out, and the electronic equipment to fail because of the harmonics and the transients. And what we needed to do was to minimize adding high frequencies to the grid that was designed for a clean 60 hertz cycle, to filter where needed, to expand the neutrals, or to go to a 5-wire system. So instead of addressing those power quality issues, the regulators are allowing the utility companies to use the ground rods on the poles as part of the distribution network. This is not happening in Ireland and Portugal. It's happening in the United States. So the grid modernization is not addressing this issue. We're adding solar systems to the grid that don't have filtered inverters to shift the electricity from DC to AC. We're adding wireless utility meters to the head ends of home utility systems, which are adding high frequencies to the home electric systems. And we're basically creating a situation where we have unshielded power lines that are radiating as vertical antennas. And this is not happening in Europe because the power lines are shielded. Because we bond the home electric supply to the copper water pipes, now we have homeowners in Massachusetts also who have unsafe levels of contact current radiating from their plumbing, and this is associated with cancer. And what does this do to the copper in blood? So Minnesota regulators already warned in 1998 that 70% of all the current going out on the hot phase wires is returning via the earth in the United States. The IEEE 519 says that this is harmful. 215B says you can't put current into the ground. And Section 92D of the Electric Code says that you can't have objectionable current sent over the grounding conductors. So ratepayers in Massachusetts who are reporting adverse impacts due to all sorts of utility infrastructure are not having the support of independent investigation of electric fields, magnetic fields, dirty electricity, pulsed radio frequencies. Instead, the Department of Public Utilities is partnered with Peter Wahlberg of the tobacco defense firm Gradient to override citizen health complaints, particularly regarding radio frequencies. So what we have is a massive increase in the United States in neurological deaths, especially for women in the age 55 and over age group. This includes especially Alzheimer's, which has the same symptom development and as electromagnetic hypersensitivity. And residents in Massachusetts who have a diagnosis of Lyme or multiple chemical sensitivity are very vulnerable to developing electromagnetic hypersensitivity. So according to the World Health Organization data, our neurological deaths have skyrocketed out of control to other countries where they are outlawing the ground current and the unshielded wires. So we could be incorporating building biology into our grid modernization, and we're not. And the ratepayers in Massachusetts who are experiencing physical harm are really in need of support. So especially, I'd like to ask your support for Senator Clinton. I think you may, Beth, have already signed on for Senator Kulik's bill, and also the smart meter opt-out bill, because people who are getting sick because a water meter, electric meter, or gas meter is put on their home are in need of immediate relief. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jean Mahoney. Jean? She left, okay. Richard Tizard, Framingham?
I'm here, but I'll pass.
Okay. Robert Judem, Framingham?
Hi. I have to admit I'm caught a little bit by surprise because I heard about this hearing just a few hours ago, and then I thought I'd come to listen, and I didn't realize that by signing up I would be called out by name to speak. But I'm glad to say a few words. I'm new to civic engagement, and I'm relatively new to this, to this particular topic. Not nearly as knowledgeable as everyone else here in the room. But I wanted to just relay something from personal experience. Last year, I decided to put solar panels on my roof. And I did that in part because, I think it's the right thing to do. But I tell you, I would not have done this if the economic incentives hadn't been there, if the numbers hadn't worked out. And they only worked out because of the great legislation and regulations that the state has put in place that, make it economically viable for most people to do this. So I want to thank you for, for all the work you've done. And, I want you to know that legislation can really drive personal behavior as it did in my case. One thing I wanted to say, I did this late in the year when the time was very close to the current incentives expiration. And there was a period of time, and I actually have to admit I don't know what's happened since, where the new regulations were not yet in place. And the solar installer told me that they've had a big lull in business because people aren't signing up because they don't know, or they didn't sign up at the time because they couldn't get installed in 2016 and they didn't yet know what 2017 would bring, what the incentives would be. So I know this is was a complicated thing to work out, but I just would encourage any efforts that can be made to last well into the future, that the time frame be long enough so that we don't have to revisit this every time and go through the painful process of figuring out what new incentives to create. I wanted to ask you something as state senators. As I said, I'm very new to civic engagement and I'm a little overwhelmed, to be honest with you. The 100 bills is an example. So, with just limited knowledge and frankly not sufficient interest to get into some of the details of the kinds of things that were discussed, nor the details of the 100 bills, what kind of advice would you have for me if I want to, lobby on behalf of the causes that are important to me at the state level, but where if I try to read those 100 bills, my eyes start to glaze over. I know I should probably come to you guys with some specific requests and not make general statements. But how can I have maximum influence?
Where do you live, sir?
Framingham.
Framingham. Well, you want to talk to your legislators. Engage with those existing legislators that are there. Believe it or not, and I think those of you that are here in Senator Eldridge's district can attest to this, that when you get a call from a constituent and they want to talk to you and they want to sit down and meet with you, 9 times out of 10, legislators will do that, and if it's not one, it may be another, because you probably have, I know you at least have 2 that represent you, a representative and a senator. So I would, first of all, ask you to engage with them, and if you're not technologically challenged like I am, you can get on the internet, and we actually have a fairly friendly way to access what's filed on the legislative website. There are primarily 3 committees that will probably have the bills that will impact the issues that we're talking about here tonight. The Environment, Natural Resources, and Agriculture Committee, number 1. The Telecommunications, Energy, and Utility Committee, number 2. And the Transportation Committee. And there may be 1 or 2 where a bill was sent off to one of those, but it will probably end up back to one of those other 3 committees that I talked about. And the good news for constituents here is that Senator Eldridge is the vice chair of the Climate Committee, and I'm the chair of the Climate Committee. And we ended up changing our rules in the Climate Committee this year. And what we did with the rules, we said that we wanted to be able to play a little bit of the role of referee, so that when bills are going through in terms of different fuel sources, moving forward transportation policy, other types of energy policy, if those bills were not consistent with climate goals, then somebody needs to at least take a look at it so that we could be sure that whatever we put out on the Senate side, that we would be looking at it through the lens of meeting our climate requirements. And both Senator Eldridge, myself, and Senator Barrett, who chairs the Energy Committee, all sit on that committee, along with some other members, all of which care very deeply about these issues. And so we will be looking at them, because sometimes it's confusing to us as well. There's 100 different bills, there's a whole range of, you can pick the topic, whether it's solar, there's probably 24 bills that are filed relative to different types of solar incentives, etc. You are correct, solar is a problem, because behind the scenes, the utilities are always, and the utilities and the fossil fuel industry are trying to stop incenting solar, because they feel as though it takes customers away from them, right? And what we're trying to do is make sure that you continue to have a choice, and you can choose to take that vote through personal choice and be able to do exactly what you just described to us that you did. So I don't know if Senator Eldridge wants to add anything, but that's, I think, the best way to be engaged is connect with your local leaders. It's not necessarily legislators, it could be local officials as well.
My question really is, how do I have influence with, my legislators? What is the best way, what is the best thing for me to ask? Do I have to ask that they, sponsor a specific bill, advocate for a specific bill? Or do I not, how can I avoid having to study those 100 bills and make a decision on what I want to ask for?
Sure, so I would say, certainly as Senator Pacheco talked about, calling your legislators and asking him or her to co-sponsor the bills, and then often the best thing is if you sign up for an email list for some of the major environmental organizations. You have the Nature Conservancy, Sierra Club, the 350 Mass.
Elders Climate Action.
Elders Climate Action. Do you have an email list?
We do.
Okay. And you'll know about the hearings, and then they can also prioritize, some of those 100 bills. So, thanks for your question. Next person we have is Charles Lids, Ashland.
I want to begin by saying that I agree with just about everything anybody has said tonight. I personally I generate twice as much electricity as I use for my house and so forth. But I want to be Cassandra tonight and talk about the dangers. Whatever we do here in Massachusetts, and maybe even whatever we do in the United States, even if somehow we could ignore what's going on nationally, we're going to be in for a lot of trouble about this. And I hope that you will think long-term, not just, I understand the urgency. I think the urgency is really important, but we need to think long-term, and you really need a serious study of this, not just, me getting up here and shooting my mouth off. But let me try three things. One is obviously flooding. And I know Boston is at least talking about that with the state, and I'm all for that. I think that's tremendously important. Without Boston, Massachusetts is in real financial trouble, and we all know that. So we've got, however, the problem of, of other parts of the state, particularly Cape Cod, where we are going to lose the most valuable properties because they're all lined up along the shore. And we need to think, among other things, about how we're going to deal with the insurance problems that this poses. And the third one is something that's even perhaps a little further out, which is, we're talking all the time about refugees and the problems of Syria and so forth, but we have 168 million people in Bangladesh alone, of whom at least half of them are going to lose their homeland. And even if you just talk about the United States, we're probably going to lose most of South Florida. We're going to have refugees. We really need to be thinking about that. So anyway, thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Charles. Appreciate your testimony.
I just want to say that we are thinking of it. We certainly can't impact everything globally and within the state legislature, but just so you'll know, and it was quickly referenced by Steve Long at the beginning, but there is a piece of legislation called the Comprehensive Adaptation Management Planning Bill. It's CAMP for short. And that bill essentially gets out of the thinking mode of just silos, but rather asks that it demands that we do a comprehensive adaptation management plan for the state. So we look at areas where there's going to be flooding, and already is. We look at areas in which drought is impacting our state. We're looking at not only the coastal regions. We started off this tour yesterday on Cape Cod, with the U.S. Geological Survey, looking at all the research and the science that they're putting forward relative to coastal zone areas in the Commonwealth. And we're also looking at places like the Berkshires and other places where at the foot of a lot of the mountainous areas, or say big hills here in Massachusetts, that we have a lot of problems with flooding, extreme weather events, how they impact. So all of that is part of the comprehensive adaptation management plan, and it's 8 o'clock. But anyway, we still have some more time.
Great, next person is Scott Golder.
Pass.
Okay. Bob Morrison, Sudbury.
Yeah, Bob Morrison, Sudbury, a member of the Sudbury Energy Committee and other committees actually in town here. Great to see you guys. My goal is to be brief the speaker tonight. It's really time to pass carbon pricing. I'm talking about Senate Bill 1821, Mike Barrett's bill. I'm in his district. It used to be in Jamie's district, but a different story. I know Senator Pacheco, you had a bill in the last session. This is now the third session in which carbon pricing will be up. Let's rally around this bill. I think you're both co-signers of it, and now's a great time to do it. Gasoline prices are depressed. Putting a price on that and will barely even be noticed by anyone at the pump. I can almost guarantee you that it'll hardly even be noticed. So anyway, let's do it. Let's do it in this session. Thanks.
Okay, next person.
You think I should? I just want to say I am actually not a co-sponsor of that particular bill. I am for putting a price on carbon. I think many people have read in the press just recently where the governor has come out and said that he is not in favor of it. Now that doesn't mean we shouldn't still try to put a price on carbon, but that just puts in place a major hurdle, because now you require 2/3 vote in the House and Senate in what will be next year a state election year. So you do the prognosis for yourself about how that may end up. My bill that I filed, which is a separate piece of legislation, it is a carbon pricing bill, but it is a separate bill. It puts a price on carbon, but it allows the administration itself to trigger the price on carbon. And here's how it happens. It triggers when they don't meet the targets that they said that they're for. So they've signed on to the Global Warming Solutions Act, they've signed on to the 2030 Paris targets, and if in 2019, a full year before the 2020 date, that they're not on track to meet those climate targets, that carbon pricing economy-wide will then go in place. So it puts the responsibility back on the executive branch. If you say you can do it without a price on carbon and meet these targets, hallelujah, that's great. But if you are not making it, then it automatically goes into place. And by the way, the Supreme Court has ruled, and Attorney Ismay from CLF has stated before our committee that we do not need new legislation, that the existing law allows the administration to implement a price on carbon. It's just that they're not doing it. So this would trigger the may to a shall.